Well, I thank Dr. Gingrey and I thank Mr. Hall for his unique insight. It's a privilege to come tonight. I think Mr. Hall is right. There are a lot of people of goodwill in this body that really want to do something about this. As a matter of fact, the heat is on. I had a Democratic colleague tell me recently that he was on an airplane and a guy came up to him and said, "Bring down gas prices." And the guy was pretty upset, as we see often now at home. And the Democratic member said, "Don't you think if we could do something quickly, we would?" And that really is the response that a lot of members give. And politics sometimes gets in the way of progress, but I got to tell you that it is important the votes you cast, and it is important when you try to push a legislative initiative, and when things are vetoed and do not go forward, there are consequences. And we find ourselves in that mess today. I don't come to the floor to blame anybody. Frankly, I come to the floor to offer solutions. And I think the blame game has got a lot of people really dissatisfied with the Congress to begin with. But these solutions really need to be debated and voted on. That's what we're really trying to press, is for more legislative activity around new energy sources for Americans. Now, for the last 8 years, I have had the privilege of co-chairing a large bipartisan group in the Congress called the Renewable Energy and Energy Efficiency Caucus. It's well over half the House. I know both these men, I think, are on the caucus. But it's about 60% Democratic members, 40% Republican members. And I have to tell you, from our perspective, conservation is kind of job one. I say conservation is not for wimps. It's for warriors. Not everybody's going to put the uniform of our armed forces on, but everybody can help our country in a mighty way by increasing efficiency and conserving as they can. They can weatherize their home and save electricity. They can cut back and they can go to a more efficient vehicle, and they can be smart about how they consume energy. And as we reduce demand, prices will come down, and every American has a patriotic obligation to push for efficiencies and conservation, and that really ought to be job one. And we all need to say more about that because it's real. The number one energy source over the last generation in this country is conservation. If you just calculate all of the energy and how much we've saved since the 70s when we conserve and create efficiencies, that's important. Now, there's an irony here, and that is the Energy Policy Act that was signed into law almost 3 years ago this week, EPAC, Energy Policy Act 2005, was a Republican bill with a Republican Congress signed by a Republican president, and everybody trashes the president, the vice president for knowing a lot about the oil and gas industry. But the truth is, and I was there and wrote what was called the Energy Efficiency Cornerstone Act with some industry groups for the renewable and energy efficiency organizations. That was rolled in, and if you were in the wind, solar, biomass, geothermal, or renewable energy sector, you love that bill. And you said, this is the best bill that's been signed into law for us in a long, long time. But as Dr. Gingrey said, those tax credits to incentivize the investments in those new technologies have expired. Some of them may still be going on, but most of them have already expired. They were 2 years. Now, if you're in a majority in the Congress today, you have a majority in the House and the Senate, and you believe in those things, why in the world have you not only extended them for another 2 years, but extended them for 5 years or 10 years? There's an article today that the chairman of the Senate Finance Committee is frustrated that he can't get the votes in the Senate to bring this up. You talked about Congressman Bartlett from Maryland. I am the original co-sponsor with him of the extenders for these tax incentives for renewables and efficiencies without any tax increases. Just extend them. If you believe in them, extend them. Don't worry about the budget consequences because it will stimulate, and right now the cost of energy is so heavy we can't afford not to. As a matter of fact, we can't afford to do a lot of things now because of the cost of energy. We really can't afford any more time delays, any more recesses, as Dr. Gingrey says. And these investment tax credits are important. The industry groups will tell you, give us a 5-year investment tax credit and you'll see major investments. If you really believe in those things to the new majority, and I'm not blaming you, I'm just saying let's get on with it. Bring it up now. Time is of the essence. Gentlemen talked about nuclear. And yes, Yucca Mountain is out there, and yes, you can take the spent fuel from nuclear and you can bury it, but that's a long now protracted process that's involved in a legal dispute. What does France do? Because they get 81% of their electricity from nuclear, they reprocess the spent fuel. They're not as afraid of it as we are. Now listen, the French have not been accused of being overly courageous here of late, yet here they have more courage than we do. Actually, they're smarter than we are on energy utilization. They go 81% nuclear and they reprocess the spent fuel and turn most of it back into energy, and they have half as many nuclear reactors as we do. We're at about 105 reactors. They're at about 53 reactors. They have one reprocessing facility, therefore we would need two. We have the technology to do it. I represent the Oak Ridge National Laboratory. We can demonstrate for the country right now, and TVA is prepared to show we can reprocess the spent fuel and stand up nuclear, and the gentleman is right. It's 8 to 12% right now, reactors online, of our total electricity capacity. It needs to be at least a fourth, nuclear. Now, they're going to come up, the Democrats, in a few minutes and talk about Boone Pickens. Okay, he's an oil man who now says 25% wind. Great. He shows us where they can be put. Great. What they're not going to tell you is he also says, and go after all the oil and gas capacity in this country that you can, because we have to have new energy. Okay, we can go in all these renewable and efficiency areas, but it's still not enough given the demands. The demand is way up. We've had a robust economy for 15 years in this country. I know it has sputtered of late, but because of that dynamic economy, and because of the demand in India and China and other parts of the world, the demand exceeds the supply globally, and the price points are now unacceptable and unsustainable. We've got to have some new capacity as well. Outer Continental Shelf, way out in the ocean where you cannot see it, should be a no-brainer for people if the state says okay. So that's what Senator McCain has proposed, is let the states decide. That's a good idea. If South Carolina wants to do it, let them do it. If Florida doesn't want to do it, don't let them do it. But get out of the way with a global moratorium. The President released the executive moratorium on Outer Continental Shelf exploration. Now the Congress should do it. Another thing that the Speaker ought to bring to the floor. Let's lift the moratorium. Things have changed. When President Clinton vetoed ANWR in 1996, 70% of the American people thought that we should preserve all of that Alaskan wilderness and not drill. Today it's the other way around. 70% of the American people say let's get on with it because we can't afford gas. We need help. Senator Obama says it's going to be 7 years before you can pull any of it out. How much worse off are we going to be in 7 years if we don't get started now? We need all of the above. And let me tell you, I know a lot of Democrats want to go ahead and start drilling. They want the votes, but they won't let us have the votes. Today, here at the Capitol in Washington, there were dozens of protesters holding up signs saying, do not drill, protect our coastlines, protect our wildlife area regions. And I got to tell you, they are now in a minority in this country. The American people don't want them up here protesting us going after American energy for American citizens. We have to do all the above. And I just want to close on a couple of new technologies that have great potential. Out of the Silicon Valley, which has frankly led the world now for a long time on things like information technology and really helped the U.S. economy and our exports, there is a company called Bloom Energy, and they've developed a solid oxide stationary fuel cell. It looks like the HVAC system in your home, and without a transmission system at all, it creates electricity. Now, it obviously has to have some feedstock going in, but it can run off a host of feedstocks. It can run off natural gas, it can run off of ethanol, it can run off solar in some applications. But this is a unique new technology. We're trying to demonstrate that stationary solid oxide fuel cell here on the Capitol, because all of these lights are on today as a result of a fossil-fired, dirty powerhouse here in Washington, where we actually pollute in Washington about as bad as anywhere in the country. There's not much efficiency here. The lights stay on all the time. It's really ridiculous. The Democrats have a greening initiative for the Capitol, but it mostly involves light bulbs. We really need to get serious about it and take some of these buildings off that fossil powerhouse and move into solid oxide stationary fuel cell type technology. Plug-in hybrids, we need them. Get them to the marketplace. Biodiesel, ethanol, new fuel mixes, get on with it. Wind technologies have tremendous potential in the northern and central United States. As the gentleman from Georgia says, the right approach is everything. Don't pick winners and losers. Don't leave anything off the table. They did that in California with electricity, and the lights went out. You can't regulate yourself into a solution here. You can't tax your way into a solution here. We have to have a robust agenda, and it is time for Democrats and Republicans to come together and get this done. I thank the gentleman for coming again tonight, giving us the opportunity to talk about what the solutions are, and then let's get on with it. The American people are tired of waiting, and I yield back.